Better Call Saul Season 6 Episode 3 Ending Explained. Michael Mando, what a performance. With this episode picking up directly from the car chase at the end of Episode 2, let's dig in and break down the epic final third, but more importantly the overall episode. So, here is Better Call Saul Season 6 Episode 3 Ending Explained. Just to let you know, this video will contain spoilers. Rock and Hard Place picked up directly after the chase at the end of Episode 2, which saw Nacho fleeing the cousins. We saw him enter a field and an oil container where the small openings with light shining down were the only entry points into it, and means of being able to see the danger. Following a similar tone to the motel scenes earlier on in the season, Nacho was hiding and we saw him do the unthinkable, and hold his breath and dip his body under thick oil to avoid being spotted. This was the perfect moment to choose for this scene. We had the build-up of suspense, gradually, ever since the motel and chase at the end of Episode 2, and instead of being a huge moment here where he gets found, we got the opposite. The pacing was slowed down even further, and as Nacho quite literally had to hold his breath, we as the viewers also did too. It allowed the suspense to build further, rather than erupt, which then allowed us to see Nacho live out one of his final days before escaping into the darkness of night. After managing to seek shelter at a mechanic's place where he was having his car fixed up, we saw him make a phone call to his father, where it became apparent to both of them that it's likely the last time that they're going to speak with each other. It was a poignant moment, and one that evoked emotion in the sense that you could just feel the mess that Nacho felt as though he'd got himself tied up into over the years. Following the call with his father, he spoke to Mike and Gus, and essentially arranged a deal where he would tell Hector Salamanca whatever story they wanted him to, as long as his father was kept safe, and this was something that was promised by Mike. We saw Nacho arrive in a way that was unexpected and extremely clean on the eye. They structured this scene almost like The Last Supper. You could feel that Nacho's story was gradually winding down and he had almost had enough of all of it. Mike had to rough him up to make it look believable, like they found him, and that he wasn't working alongside them and was taken in whilst bargaining a deal. I feel this was a time where we saw Mike express some real emotion. The lack of words, but sheer empty and sadness in his eyes painted more than 1,000 words in that moment. Once he'd been roughened up, we saw Gus enter and align stories with Nacho, ensuring that he was going to paint the perfect picture and keep Gus in the clear. The plan was to blame it on somebody called Alvarez. With that, we embarked onto the final third, where we saw Gus and Nacho approach Salamanca, the cousins, and Juan Bolsa when Nacho was about to meet his fate. We heard a line recited about how there are good deaths and bad deaths, and based on Nacho's decision to inform the Salamancas on who he was working with, it would either be quick and as painless as possible, or slow and painstaking, which we knew they're fully capable of. Whilst this was happening, we had a shot where we saw Nacho's hand behind his back bleeding, and it became clear that there was going to be an alteration to the plan. Mike alluding to the fact that it could potentially go south, and that he wanted to be there was also a hint to something potentially happening. Once we saw Nacho admit the cover story that it was Alvarez who he was working with, and the moment where he could have potentially dropped Gus in it, but chose not to, we saw Michael Mando deliver a performance that was quite literally perfect. The sheer bitterness, disgust, menacing nature, and coldness in his tone as he admitted to Hector that he was the one who put him in the chair was so powerful. He used the piece of glass that he hid in his hand to slice Juan's leg and turn the tables completely. I thought he was going to kill him, but he in fact turned on himself. It was a moment that surprised me completely, but it became clear that Nacho just felt as though he couldn't take being on the run and hiding and fighting for his life any longer. That, and also the fact that they would put him through a far more slow, painstaking death, where he'd likely be tortured. Michael Mando as Nacho in this episode delivered what one would call an audacious character performance, and delivered acting chops that led to and provided a moment of pure excellence in the final third. It was the perfect way for this character to be sent off, and it tied into his one step ahead of the game mentality, albeit if it did cost him his own life. The overkill at the end in the background by Hector and the cut to black on the sound of the gunshot was harrowing to watch, and made you feel so bad that Nacho's life had come to an end. It was an incredible scene that evoked true emotion and was gut-hitting. Outside of this, which most definitely felt like the main driving force of Episode 3, we followed Jimmy and Kim still working on their scheme to take down Howard Hamlin. We saw them get Huel to cut a key to a car, so we'll see how that plays out further down the line. We also saw Kim get approached by Suzanne and reveal that she knew about Lalo and the true identity of him. She appeared to think that Jimmy was fully aware of his identity when he secured the $7 million bail, which then puts a difficult question upon him, which is, do you essentially want the cartel to be your enemy or to work with them? That's the difficult question Jimmy is going to have to deal with and decide whether or not he wants to address. It sounds as though he's just going to claim that he wasn't aware of his identity to keep the cartel off his back, which I think is the smarter decision. I thought that this episode was simply phenomenal. With an episode that was stolen by Michael Mando, it was by far the best performance he'd ever given and allowed him to go out in true style. I'm interested to see what will happen in the next episode of the show, and we got a glimpse of it right at the end. So next week most certainly can't come soon enough. What did you think of this episode? Leave a comment down below, and don't forget to subscribe. I'll see you next time.